Hello and welcome to the budget special transmission. I am JAWAD TEHAMI. The federal government has laid out the fiscal budget for fiscal year 2022 and 23, and that has been unveiled with a total outlay of 9.5 trillion rupees, with the target for the growth that has been set at 5%. Finance Minister Mifta Ismail presented the budget in the National Assembly, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has congratulated Finance Minister Mifta Ismail and his team on presenting this budget despite all the constraints, dubbing it as a Herculean task. Let me give you some quick statistics of what has been presented by the federal government. As I've already described, that the total outlay constitutes 9.5 trillion rupees with a GDP growth rate target of 5% for the fiscal year 2022 and 23. Now, the government has also set the fiscal deficit target of 4.9% for the GDP for the fiscal year 2022 and 23. The government has decreased a fuel allowance for the government officials and the cabinet members by 40%. And the inflation target has been set at 11.5% for the fiscal year 2022 and 23. Now, talking about the import and the export target, the government has set import target at $70 billion and export target has been set at $35 billion. Now, the government has set remittances target at $33.2 billion, while the current account deficit target has been set at 2.2% of the GDP. Now, there is a budget for interest payment that has been set at 3,950 billion rupees, with the domestic payment of 3,439 billion rupees and the external payment of 511 billion rupees. Now, talking about the public sector development program, the allocation has been set at 808 billion rupees. Now, the FBR tax collection target has been set at 7,004 billion rupees, and out of which the provinces will get 4,100 billion rupees and the federation will receive 4,904 billion, and the non-tax revenue is set at rupees 200 billion. Talking about the defense budget, that has been set at 1,523 billion rupees. The government has also set aside 530 billion for pension. 699 billion rupees are set for the targeted subsidies, and 1,242 billion have been set for the grants. Now, Benazir income support program allocation is set at 364 billion rupees. There are a lot of other things which have been presented forth by the federal government, and to talk more about the various aspects and various statistics that have been given by the federal government, we are now joined by Dr. Hasnain Javed, who is an economist, is joining us on Skype, and Dr. Mahmood Khalid, who is a senior research economist. He is also joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for your time, both of you gentlemen, at this special transmission regarding the budget for the fiscal year 2022 and 23. So I'll begin the discussion with you, Dr. Hasnain Javed. What do you think? Do you think it is a pro-public budget, as has been dubbed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in such a challenging time, or of course, what we can call it is a boom-bust growth cycle, or what I can say is a shrinking fiscal space, whereas the exchange rate pressure, mounting current account deficit, inflation, high inflation, which is about the 13.8, energy sector bottleneck, which is, never been seen in the history, and absence of the supportive environment for the private sector is all missing space. In these circumstances, where when the budget comes in and the target has been set on the inflation for about 11.5, I can say it is much difficult time, very much contractionary time. This government style or of course, I mean, people knows that they are into the expansionary move, and they have the expansionary model. But for this time around, they have seen like they are into the contraction. They are contracting most of the things for the sake of the future, for the sake of the future economic prospects. Because the import will, if I can say, the amid decline economy, the Pakistan oil and edible import will surge to 59.98% USD, which is 21.87 billion in the July March. Then is the oil increased to the 96%, and the crude oil is where it is about the 82.2%. Liquefier gas is about 91, and same as the case with the other things. And the current account deficit goes on to the 13.8. So in these scenarios, where the current account deficit, where the foreign reserve, where the exchange rate. So as we all know that the foreign exchange rate is about $10 billion. So $10 billion is the very, I mean, you can call it very, uh, uh, I mean, very sloppy situation where everybody can decline over on it. So we have to be very contracted. So this budget comes up and give the breathe to the people. As we have to consider the international pressure, we have to consider the oil pressure, we have to consider the whole international market pressure. It is not about the Pakistan where the inflation is was high. So I can say, I mean, this is the, I mean, if the geopolitical or the geostrategic issue, the American, even America has asked Iran to import the oil. So if the situation arises in that way, so where the America have to ask to Iran, I mean, for the oil sake, so as the Russia is, I mean, maybe they will be into shortage of the oil in that scenario. So in that case, the government has put up the very, I mean, very crucial
Right.
task. Any government, if there is this government or any other
Right.
government, it would be the toughest.
Right, Dr. Javed, your point is well taken. We'll delve deeper into different other aspects of this particular budget as well. Now I am joined by Mr. Ashfaq Yusufullah. He's President ICAF, fellow chartered accountant and an economist. He's joining us on the phone line. Mr. Tola, thank you very much for your time at PTV World. You might have heard Dr. Javed saying that this budget is not based on the expansionary fiscal policy, rather is based because of the contraction. Do you agree with this? Mr. Tola, can you hear me? Unfortunately, we've lost the contact with Mr. Tola, and we'll try to reconnect to him. I'll move to you, Dr. Khalid. What do you think? Do you agree with the point which has been mentioned by Dr. Javed?
Well, in terms of looking at the budget from the contraction or the expansion side, one indicator is to look at the total budget deficit to see that whether we are expanding as compared to the last year or not. So from that perspective, I would not call it as a purely contractionary budget, because the government has not only tried to provide relief to the general public. If you look at the tax slab side, they have actually increased the threshold for the lowest taxable limit, as well as reduced the number of the slabs for the taxation regime overall. And besides that, they have also conducted various fiscal measure exercise, which if you go into the details of the budget, that would also come later on, and it would be debated in the parliament, such as taking away the exemptions in the expenditure side, what we call as the tax expenditures or the concessions. So from that perspective, they have actually created fiscal room. And under the IMF program, we have to actually delve into these sort of arrangements as well. So if you take my point in terms of calling it as a contractionary budget, so it is not something which is new for the sake of the fiscal side, because earlier as well, if you look at the previous budgets, the governments are trying to consolidate on various fronts. But the good thing about this budget is that they have also tried to factor in the business requirements and the common person requirements. So from that perspective, I would not call it that much contractionary. So it's a balanced budget in which they have
Dr.
kept.
Khalid, I've taken your point well. And now, when we talk about the benefit to the common man in specific, do you think this particular budget is pro-public? With the number of measures which have been put forth by the federal government that include, for example, those people having annual income less than 40,000 rupees will be compensated monetarily, and then there is a significant increase in the Benazir income support program to eliminate poverty, and the amount that has been set for this one is 364 billion rupees. Number of other measures, for example, the salaries individuals who earn 0.6 million to 1.2 million will be exempt from the tax.
Exactly. So if you look at the details of the budget, then you would see that the government, despite the fact that they have got limited fiscal space, have tried their utmost best to facilitate the common person. As you have just mentioned, the BISP program has been increased to a record high level of about 330 billion rupees. But besides that, they have also managed to initiate certain projects from the public sector development program, which are directly pro-poor. Like they are going to target about 20 poorest districts in the Pakistan, and the idea is to bring those districts at par with at least those which are living at the boundaries of the poverty. So from extreme poverty, which is going to be measured through the multi-dimensional poverty index, they are going to identify those households and try to bring them
Right.
upwards.
Right, your point is well taken. Dr. Khalid, I'll have to move to Mr. Ashfaq Yusuftola, President ICA, fellow chartered accountant, economist. Thank you very much for joining at this special transmission regarding budget. What do you think, Mr. Tola? Do you think this is a public-friendly budget, a pro-public budget?
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. With this fiscal space, I don't think any government can make a budget a friendly one. You see, the basic issue with us is inflation, and to counter the inflation, we don't have fiscal space. Like as you have mentioned, that the government is trying to just cater the poverty line or below poverty line people, and those who are earning less than 40,000, they are being given just 2,000 per month worth of honoraria for the next whole year. This is a good omen. Next to that is basically the relief given to the salaried class earning less than 1.2 million. Again, that is a good one, good step by the government. But at present, the economy is inflationary, and I think the inflation will go high. Today, we have a sensitive price index of 24%. So this reflects that in times to come, and with the research report from international investment bankers like Moody's or Morgan Stanley, that the oil will rise at the level of 135. And obviously we have to pass on this increase in price to the masses. Again, this will be a very recessionary type of a situation, and I don't think that the people will be in a position to digest that. So in my humble view,
you are of the view with the inflation that has been set at 11.5%, with an inflationary economy, there are a number of steps which have been taken by the present government, including the increasing the amount of the BISP, and then also broadening increasing that limit of the tax net for the salaried class, and then also enhancing the capacity of the higher education budget as well. You think that's not gonna give any sort of a benefit to the middle income class?
Well, somehow, I mean, I feel that in times to come, we will be facing more challenges. Number one, but in my humble view, that the recipe of Pakistan economy lies in the low interest rate and I think managed parity. Today, if we go by the books, the parity of rupee dollar shall not be more than 175 or max by 180. So we have got an incremental 20 rupees, which is speculative in nature. If we reduce this dollar parity by 20 rupee, we can slide the inflation by 3%, because the pass-through effect of inflation on dollar or dollar on inflation is around 10 rupee for 1.5% for every 10 rupees. Secondly, if we decrease the interest rate, I mean, the world is operating on a negative interest base. Uh, Only Pakistan and Brazil, they are in the positive zone. So we have to reduce the interest rate as well. And every percentage point of interest is costing us 280 billion rupees. So if we reduce this by 5%, we can save fiscal space of 1400 billion rupees, which is almost equivalent to maybe 100 billion less as far as my defense expenditures are concerned. So, I mean, we have got a lot to do, and we can do a lot.
So, Mr. Tola,
Like,
you said the first thing that the government needs to do is in order to reduce inflation, there should be a difference of 20 rupees, and the value of rupee should be appreciated by 20 as compared to the dollar. That's how you can get the inflation reduced to 3%. With the inclusion of $2.9 billion that is going to come from China in a couple of days from now, as which has been described by Finance Minister Miftah Ismail, do you think this particular target, which you have just mentioned, can be achieved?
I don't think, because the market has already discounted that. With the 9 point some billion reserve, including a 4.2 billion worth of swaps, and there are so many deposits, I don't think this will. Yes, obviously, once we'll be re-entering into IMF program and we'll be getting assistance from our friendly countries, I think that might play some role. But next to it is decrease in the interest rate to create a buoyancy in the local economy. By that, I don't mean that we should increase the import. We must adhere to those exchange regulations which we have introduced now, and we shall continue with that. Furthermore, I mean, my food security is in the danger zone, and I think with the type of yield per acre we are one of the lowest in the world. Like, just take an example of wheat. We are producing 1.14 ton per acre, and in our neighbor they are producing something like 4.4 ton in an acre, and the world average is 4.64. So if we even can double it, we will be in a position to export the surplus wheat. I mean, this is the only surplus wheat I am telling about.
Right. Ms. Tola, I'll have to take this point. You talked about increasing the yield per acre, which you mentioned that happens to be lower as compared to the average that the world has right now. Dr. Javed, what do you think? This is the first time in the history of Pakistan that the agriculture sector has been made tax-free. Do you think it's going to work out in the longer run?
Of course, I mean, very much agree to the Mr. Tola, because of course this is I mean, worst time in the history when the international price hike is I mean, unmaintainable. So I'm very much agree. So second point in the revenue, what we call it the business friendly, it cannot be business friendly. It's trying to be business friendly, and they are trying to be. The government is on it. So revenue mobilization, measures of economic stabilization and growth, reduction in the non-development expenditure, boosting export, beside job creation. Of course, the job creation is not that much. Now, coming to the point, the agriculture. So it was good in the last point. I mean, when there is little pressure on the import bill, if you can see the import bill, it is going on to the high point, and the import bills are like near about 90%, and imports are too high. And as we see the foreign exchange, it is about just we have the $10 billion. So I mean, it is a very crucial position. So agriculture should be exempted. Yes, it is very good, and it should be exempted. IT should be exempted, uh, and there is a lot more room. For example, if there would be another 30% of the tax, that would be, I mean, really damaging for the IT or the freelancing or whatsoever it is going on to the move. So as the Moody says, as the Bloomberg says, we are to the negative side. Well, it is trying to be on the different side. Second is the taxational side. I mean, they have given the subsidies to to the standard subsidies, but where is the subsidies for the small and medium enterprise? I mean, where is the subsidies for the leather? Where is the subsidies for the textile? Where is the subsidies for the? I mean, yes, of course. I mean, the bigger side, the large manufacturing is about the 8.2%, where it was last year it was about the 12.5. Of course, I mean, subsidies can be, I mean, going down, but of course, we have to do something little bit more for it, and we have to looking for another 3 to 4 months and for another year. It would be the real
Right.
difficult year for the Pakistan economy.
Right. Dr. Khalid, what's your take on this? Do you think it's a good move by the government in the longer run, making the agriculture tax sector tax-free?
There is
Well,
another
actually,
point. Yeah.
please go ahead, sir.
Sorry.
You want to add
Yeah,
on
yeah,
to it, sir?
yeah.
Please go ahead, sir.
Just one more
Dr.
point.
Khalid, please go ahead.
Okay. So in my humble opinion, when we say sector being exempt, actually it's not in terms of all taxes. What they have done is that they have basically provided relief in terms of the machinery and other value-added capital, which can basically increase the productivity of the agriculture sector. And this is a standard tax policy framework in which we provide certain incentives for the production so that the business grows up, and there are later taxes in the form of incomes which the sectors are providing. So from that sense, it's really a good move. And I believe that it's going to help not only increase the productivity side of the agriculture, but also bring sustainability in terms of the food security side. But the idea, as earlier mentioned by Tola Saab, is that our problem is beyond the financial allocation. It's basically the structural nature of the doing business in Pakistan, which needs to improve. And budget is one portion of that. We have to look into the regulatory regimes. We have to look into the productivity standards. We have to look into what kind of policies we are adopting in terms of the futuristic growth rate. And unless we have a kind of a long-term vision document with us, or something as a long-term plan which we are trying to adopt in the long run,
So
it will
Dr.
be very
Khalid,
difficult to do
in your
stopgap
opinion,
arrangements,
what,
etc.
what that policy could be in order to overcome the
Well,
challenges that you've just mentioned?
yeah, yes. So the idea is that we basically have to create incentives which are going to stay in the long run. Like for example, when we are providing policy incentives for the new investment to come in, we can think about allowing the greenfield investment in which the investment in the new sectors come in. And we have to think about bringing in those sectors which are really adding value to our exports as well. As already mentioned, that our gap is almost by 100%, even more than that. Our imports are about $70 billion, and our exports are stuck at 30. And if you look at the comparable countries like the Indian case and the Bangladesh, they have squeezed this difference by investing in those industries which are really value added. And to me, I think it can only work if we have a better regulatory regime, and we have to think above the allocation or taxes only. There are plenty of other options which we have to think about, which can improve
Right.
the productivity of these sectors for the future.
Right, Mr. Tola, if you can hear me, please. What sectors do you think in which we can enhance the production so that our exports can be increased? Please. Okay, Dr. Javed, talking to you about when Dr. Khalid has just mentioned that there are a number of sectors we need to enhance the exports, and we do have to overcome the imbalance between the imports and the exports, which doesn't bid well as far as Pakistan as compared to the other countries is concerned. So when specifically talking about the IT sector, do you think there is enough capacity if we try to explore different avenues in this particular sector, the exports could be enhanced considerably and huge dividends can be garnered out of it?
Yes, of course. I mean, this is very good point, and I've taken out of the accelerating the World Bank report. If they are saying the accelerating and sustaining growth over 30 years period is ambitious. particularly given the Pakistan most recent track record, but it is possible. Other countries such as China, South Asia, China, South Korea, Malaysia achieve the similar economic transformation. Same as the case, we have to target the specific target area, human capital, physical capital accumulation, and automobile sector, where the growth is set towards the upper side. As we have seen the infrastructure, I'm very much in the favor, as we have seen the American Great Depression or the suspension side. We have seen the construction side was built it. So of course there is a little very humble submission to the government, of course. So we can have the construction side or the relief in the real estate area. Second is the education for the for the higher education, we have to work on the skill-based education where the human capital exports must be taken. I mean, there is a little distortion. I think you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly, loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, then there is an allocation in the resources. Skill export and skill labor export must be taken. Agriculture and agriculture-related products must be taken. And then there is if we talk about the pensionary issue, of course, it is a 15% for the government employer. There must be the public-private participation, or of course we have to taken up very seriously for those government departments under the Ministry of Industry, under the different department, like for example Pakistan Industry Technical Assistance Center or other organizations. They are seriously a great deficit for the government. We have to privatize or make the some understanding between them so we can move on. So as far as the exports are concerned, we have to working on a very sustainable point, but this is a contextually time, I must say, and I'm saying it again. So we have to focus on it.
Right, Dr. Javed, your point is well taken. Now, Dr. Khalid, when we talk about the IT sector, the amount which has been allocated in order to facilitate the IT exports is set at 17 billion. Do you think this is sufficient in order to facilitate exports to the level so that there could be that imbalance which you already mentioned could be overcome between imports and exports of Pakistan?
Well, IT sector is one potent sector where the government can actually make room for enhancement of our export revenues. And if you look at the allocations, there is a particular PSTB project in which the government is looking for the venture capital funds in which they're going to finance those ideas actually of the IT experts and other entrepreneurs which can really bring change into our economy. And that, I think, had been the most crucial issue in terms of the economies which, as mentioned by my colleague, that those economies were basically the idea-based economies, and the governments facilitated the ideas in terms of the growth and development. Now, if you pour in too much resources in the existing infrastructure or the processes which are producing, they're not going to be producing that much. For example, textile is one sector. I'm not saying that that is something which we should lose hope from. But in terms of the emerging sectors which can really push our ambitions for the higher growth would be in the IT sectors and those idea-based economies such as the services, even the transportation, and thinking about largely providing the connecting activities with the regional economies and others. These are the areas which we have to focus. So how we can do it?
For that, beg your pardon for the interruption, as Dr. Javed earlier mentioned, since there is a focus of this current government on the higher education as well, so 65 billion rupees have been set for this purpose as well. And earlier we saw Minister of Planning and Development, Ahsan Iqbal, after the budget was presented, he was talking to the media and he said that laptops would be distributed among the shining students as well, and the education is going to be digitally driven. So when we talk about the intertwining IT sector with education sector and building that skilled based education system here in Pakistan, do you think it can give those sort of dividends in the longer run?
Well, it really can. And but the thing is that we again have to give a kind of a direction towards where we are moving. If we only pour resources in terms of producing the graduates and the employability of those graduates is not good enough. That, in other words, what we mean to see is that the ideas are not there, or they're not facilitated in terms of growing up, then maybe it's not the best way to do it. So I think that besides investing in the education, we have to take this sector from the complete value chain process, in which even looking at the gateways, financial gateways through which the payments are actually made, like the PayPal and other, we have to think about improving those mechanisms as well, so that the producers in the form of the IT experts or the freelancers are actually connected with the rest of the world. And then definitely that is something which is lesser resource incentive, or needs lesser space to develop. So we can focus it in the form of future growth. We can do that, but for that we have to really develop a kind of a complete value chain based approach. And it's not just providing the students with the laptops which is going to help us in terms of achieving that target. So we have to think long, we have to think about the whole value chain process, and create both the financial as well as regulatory incentives in terms of promoting these sectors which can be buoyant for our economic growth for future.
There is an additional thing that has been announced to be given to the students. Beside giving them laptops and giving them that education system that is digitally driven, scholarships are also going to be given to the students. So there are a number of steps in higher education sector the government is planning to undertake. Dr. Javed, what do you say about that?
Okay, my take is on this. Higher Education Commission, of course, if they are working on the skill education, if they are working on the working alongside with the TEFTA, if they are working alongside with the technical education, if they are working alongside with the skill education, and if they create the number of skilled workers, skilled labor, and skilled force, and the skill education, then it would really work. And second other thing, we have already the 5,000 plus PhD this year from the China and other countries, and of course we have a number of people, but they are not getting any job with, else with teaching and other things. So we have to produce the mechanical things. We have to work on the target areas. We have to focus on the different areas, and HEC must have to focus and align with the industrial liaisons. If there is no industrial bridging, if there is no industrial liaison, and if there is no skill education has been working, so only graduation scholarship or scholarship giving is not the process to be enhancing our industry. We have to be the producing country. We have to be manufacturing country. We must have to shift our ideas from consumer society to the producing society, and it is very much needed. And the second point, for example, any policies from any government, if the idea is good, it should be sustainable, it should be transitory, it should be continuing. If the other government, for example, suppose it is for the 6 month or the 1 year, and then there is another government, then there is other government, then the good ideas, the good policies must have the good transition and must appreciate it towards the higher growth. And Pakistan is for the sake of the better economic prospect, we have to have the balance the demand of the sustainable economic development, and the new economic zone is completely based on the pivot of economics. Economics. There must not be any politics involved, and there must not be any political idea. Well, what I can suggest is it is very good. Many vocational institute has been training this solar panel distribution uh, uh, related to the agriculture item, agriculture products. So
Right.
the taxation is also on the zero. So we have to work more on, appreciating the resource for the skill education.
Right, your point is well taken, Dr. Khalid and Dr. Javed. We are now joined by Dr. Aisha Ghaus Pasha, who is the Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Economy. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Pasha, for joining in at this special transmission at PTV World regarding the budget. So finally, the budget for the fiscal year 2022 and 23 has been presented. It was a Herculean task indeed. It must have been nerve-jangling task for the current government, especially given the time they have just taken the reins of the country.
Absolutely. These are actually extraordinarily challenging times for the country. Particularly on the economy side, it's been, we haven't really experienced this kind of a crisis situation on the economy before. And in fact, even the whole global economy is in a state of, unrest at this stage. Quickly, the stabilization is becoming an issue. Inflation is coming up. So it was particularly challenging for us on two counts. One, we were very keen that we put the economy back on, stabilize the economy, put it back on track for more sustained growth and, sustained development. The other was, given the super cycle, global super cycle, insulating the ordinary people of Pakistan was a major task. And how do we, along with the stabilization, do we want to control the level of borrowings and the level of debt that we are in, and of course the deficits and everything? How do you give relief for the poor, the masses, the people who are not so economically well off? And simultaneously, how do you finance it? Do you want to borrow more from it? So devising a strategy whereby we can redistribute income by taxing and raising more money from the better off people in the country, and then diverting and giving them as subsidies and relief measures for the poor, and as I said, the masses of the country. So it's been challenging.
Right, Dr. Pasha. So, as you have mentioned, the second point, the basic target of the government was to take care of the common people over here in Pakistan as far as this new budget was concerned. So, what are those key points or the salient features the government thinks or it can boast about that it has actually taken for providing the relief to the common man?
Yes, this is actually a number of measures. Some in continuation of what the Prime Minister of the country, Shahbaz Sharif Sahab, had already announced, and some are new now. Let me talk to you about some of the basic subsidies that have been provided directly benefiting, targeting the people with lower economic endowments. The first one is the subsidies for relief in terms of lower prices of basic consumption food items like wheat flour, sugar, and palm oil. The oil, vegetable cooking oil. That is the first thing. We have made allocation for the utility store corporation so that those items can be sold at subsidized prices for consumption of people in general. Because food prices, we wanted to really ensure that the food price is somehow taken care of. Second, the BISP program already taking place in the country, the subsidies, the transfers, the stipend being given to the lower income people in the country. We have added on to it a 2,000 rupee per month stipend transfer, so that the inflationary impact of the petroleum prices, the hike that is taking place, is somehow, there is relief for the people in the lower segment. And through this measure, we are benefiting not only the current beneficiaries of the BISP program, which are about 9 million, or is 6 to 7 million. On top of them, we have increased it to another, a total of 14 million households who will get the stipend for the rest of the year, so that the petrol prices and inflation are somehow subsidized. Then, along with this, we have announced a number of important initiatives for the backward areas of Pakistan. For the first time on the development side, those 20 districts which have been identified as the most backward in the country will now be better served, and development in them will be planned through an allocation specifically for those underdeveloped districts, so that they can come at power and economic opportunities for the less, for the people are created. So my point to emphasize here is that not only have we given relief on the current side, we're also targeting the lower strata of the population, particularly in the backward areas, through our development initiatives. So a number of
indeed, a number of steps which have been presented, and that those measures are going to be taken by the federal government in order to provide the common man that relief that it had been looking forward to. Now, there is a sticking point when we talk about the expenditure, and especially when it comes to debt servicing. The stats that we've seen last time around, it was 36%. Now it has gone up to 45.5%. Don't you think it's going to be a huge burden on national economy overall, despite all these measures which the federal government is taking in order to provide relief to the common man?
Actually, you've identified it very rightly. This is a huge, a drain on our resources and the largest single head of expenditure on the public exchequer. This is basically a consequence of the accumulation of debt that has taken place in the past years, and it's been an unfortunate thing that over the last 3 years that we see a very substantially higher growth in accumulation of debt compared to historically. It's been a problem, high accumulation of debt throughout, but more so in the last 3 years because the growth in debt taking has increased over the last 3 years or so. Now, the point is that that debt stock has to be serviced through debt servicing. We are facing high interest rates because of prevailing inflation, globally as well as locally, very important. Then because of our deficit on the current account side and the economic stress that the country's external side is facing, because of higher external financing needs, the depreciation of Pakistani rupee has taken place. And because of that, our international borrowing will now have to be serviced, with a lower rupee value. In terms of with the low, since the currency has been depreciated, it will translate into a higher burden, the existing external debt. So it's a major challenge. The way forward basically is that we should, reduce the pace at which we've been accumulating debt. We have tried to do so through higher resource mobilization in this budget, through curtailment of expenditure. Let me also point out resource mobilization strategy in this budget. Perhaps it is something that needs to be noted because very clearly we are focusing on direct taxation.
Direct taxation. The government is focusing on direct taxation. Your point is well taken. Dr. Aisha Ghaus Pasha, Minister of State for Economy. Thank you very much for your time at this special transmission at PTV World regarding the budget 2022-23. Dr. Javed, when we talk about expenditure, as Dr. Aisha Ghaus Pasha has just mentioned, that this debt servicing happens to be a huge burden on national economy. Given that percentage, which has been increased from 36% to 45% now, don't you think despite no matter whatever the government does, whatever the measures it takes for providing the relief to the common man, this debt servicing payment is going to be a huge burden overall?
Of course, and there is no doubt. Of course, government is trying to mitigating the people suffering. Of course, they are transforming every sector. They are trying to, but there is no room for reforms. There is only room for contraction. There is only room for the sustainability. As I discussed, for example, if you allow me to, add one more thing, IPSOS report, where there is an economy, there is three types of economy. One is the real, second is the casino, and third is the shadow economy. If we talk about the shadow economy, there is a 6% of the GDP added to the shadow economy, where the 110 rupees, tax theft in the different area, whereas the tobacco lubricants.
Dr. Javed, unfortunately, we are very
and other
short of time. If you could give us a very brief closing remark over the overall budget. Do you think it's going to bid well for the government in order to provide relief to the common man?
Yes, of course. I mean, what I can say is it's trying to be onto the right path. They are trying to fix the direction, and they will onto the right direction because this is the
So
most
you're
toughest
of the view that the
ever
federal government
budget.
has set the direction right with the presentation of this budget. Dr. Khalid, what's your say, your closing remarks on this?
Well, I would agree to what our colleague has just mentioned. With an add on it is, especially if we focus on the public sector development program, we have to be really careful that we have to make value for the public money. It should not be just spending for the sake of spending. Even if we can't manage our expenditure side well because it's kind of a charged liability, we should create more economic activity from our public sector development program. We should not waste it on those projects which are delayed over time or they're not that much beneficial, and focus on those projects only which can really bring in some multiplier impact in the economy so that the overall circle goes up. That is the only
Right, Dr.
recipe.
Khalid, your point is well taken. You're of the view that economic activity should be generated from the public sector development program and the sectors which are associated with this. Thank you very much for your time at this special transmission. Dr. Mahmood Khalid, Senior Research Economist, he was joining us on Skype, and Dr. Hasnan Javed, Economist, he was also joining us on Skype. Thank you, both of you, for your precious time at this special transmission. We really appreciate that. And with this, we come to the end of today's special transmission regarding the federal budget that has been presented by the government with a total outlay of 9.5 trillion rupees with a growth rate target set at 5%. Number of measures the federal government has presented it will take in order to provide the relief to the common man. Thank you for being with us.